Everything is so unknown.
I literally had no clue what to expect.
Nobody could have predicted this long of a shutdown.
The first case of the deadly Chinese coronavirus making its way to the U.S., a Washington state man testing positive for the deadly virus. According to the CDC, the man in his 30s flew home to Seattle last Wednesday, infected but not yet symptomatic. According to officials, shortly after arriving in Seattle, he began feeling ill and reached out to his healthcare provider on Sunday. 24 hours later, his diagnosis was confirmed by the CDC.
The way that it was perceived initially was more of, it's not really a concern here, it's not really a concern here, and then it was almost like overnight it was like, oh no, this is a problem.
I'd actually been following the virus online through various different websites because I teach microbiology. So it became part of my class routine to check that every day.
I was not personally worried about COVID because it was based in China. Everything I had read didn't seem like it was any kind of a big deal, and having never lived through a pandemic before, I literally had no clue what to expect. I just never would have thought it ever would happen.
I was just kind of shocked just because this is the first time anybody has ever experienced anything like this, and I'd say it sort of made it very real, although it was sort of closing in on us in a sense, in that the cases were rising and people were starting to get nervous. That made it extremely real.
New numbers as this coronavirus spreads. More than 160,000 cases in the United States, over 2,980 deaths. And we reached another tragic milestone today, the most reported coronavirus deaths in a single day, well over 500. This is our new reality right now. It is absolutely staggering where we find ourselves tonight. More than 3/4 of Americans are under stay-at-home orders tonight.
The way they made it sound on TV is it made it sound like, to me, the entire state was shutting down. That's what scared me.
I think it was a lot of like unknowns, like what does this mean? When will we return to school? Will we actually only be closed for 2 weeks?
A study by the online startup Burbio finds that more than half of students in the U.S. will be studying virtually when they go back to school or have already gone back to school this late summer. 52% will be doing virtual learning only, according to this study.
That's a big component of, making eye contact, having conversations outside of your curriculum, like getting to know who people are. And as hard as we tried in the beginning to do different types of icebreakers, it just is not the same. And I know that virtual education works in some environments, and maybe it's structured differently to allow for that, but I find it really difficult to connect with my students, and that's a big bummer because that is why I'm a teacher.
I can come over and help a student or check on how their progress is going. I can kind of read their difficulties, their frustrations. In this environment, especially at the beginning when it was all asynchronous, you wouldn't see students for a very long period of time, and then you would get their work, and it wasn't to the quality you wanted. So the inability to control the environment is a major challenge.
I know that I have students that really benefit from being in person, and that I don't really think online learning is optimal for most students. There is like a piece of relief for myself personally, and I think for most teachers, when you hear you don't have to go into the building and potentially put yourself at risk, then there's also simultaneously that disappointment of, I know that that's hard on my students.
Kids would walk in and I'm like, who are you? You just don't know the kids. You miss the time to talk about things.
The RED plan outlines the foundation, it outlines the expectations and so forth, but now we want to make sure that we are really looking at it from all avenues and that we are operationalizing it, which include topics such as Canvas, professional development, device deployment, and so forth. And I will be giving you some of those updates tonight with where we are. In reference to Canvas, our contract with Canvas was finalized on Friday, and our back end is in the process of being set up.
There was significant training on Canvas. However, I feel like that's the type of move that you're never really prepared enough for. It just takes lots of experience. It takes a lot of trial and error. So there was a lot of training, and yet I feel like everyone arrived feeling unprepared because you're walking into an unknown.
Well, first off, I learned a lot this year just to learn how to do, I guess I'd say what you call old school. Like, I want to hand out a piece of paper, I want that piece of paper back, I want to get up and I want to lecture and I want student interaction, and yeah, trying to convert things. And I felt like I had Word documents, I had PowerPoints, I didn't have PDFs, I didn't have that stuff. So once again, some teachers were working towards that. I'm sure they felt more comfortable moving it. No, there was definitely some anxiety when it was like, get things you need online by this time. Yeah, there was some anxiety.
Tonight, we will propose an opening plan for 7 through 12 students. This plan has been developed in coordination with the SFEA leadership and has components of live instruction and virtual elements. Students at the secondary level change classes every period, so we have proposed a hybrid structure.
It's really hard to try and figure out what you're going to do differently for one student who's physically in the room versus the 99% that are online. And so to that end, it's hard to manage both without it turning into a 100% virtual lesson, just there happen to be students in the room as well.
I didn't necessarily think it was a great idea to come back in moderate. If you look at the numbers where we are now, things are so much worse than when we maybe should have come back in the fall, but it didn't seem safe in the fall either. So it's hard to know what was right, and I don't blame anybody who's made decisions for making the wrong decisions if they were even wrong, because who would know? Who could have known how things are changing by the minute sometimes, it feels like. So you asked my opinion. I thought it, following the metrics and following what the experts were saying, that we probably should have waited until we got to a low transmission rate, but at that rate, I don't know that we would ever have set foot in the building.
Maybe we should just close down until like the first full week of January, January 9th or whatever, so people have a chance to get home from holidays, stay home for 2 weeks, and maybe even just shut the entire country down for the next 6 weeks. Just everything's virtual for the next 6 weeks. And maybe then we can get a grip on it and we can get under control and we can actually have a normal winter season, a fairly normal winter season, and have a nice good spring season and have graduation, have prom, and have all of those other really important milestones. But at this point, it seems like we're not.
But I think I've just learned that you have to be as flexible as possible, and more so than any other year, I just have learned that I don't have any bad kids. Like, I've never had bad kids, but there's always a reason that a student's doing something, or a reason that a student's not submitting work or not responding to you, and it's never personal. And it's always a matter of figuring out how to motivate the student or work with the student, or in some cases get the needs of the student met so that they're able to access English class.
Being flexible has always been an important component of teaching, and you can't really beat yourself up if things aren't going as you expected or as you had planned. You just have to roll with it and try and adjust and adapt and hope that you're not losing your students along the way.
Keep asking, like, are we doing it right? Are we doing it wrong? But that's my big. I want to make sure it's good for you guys. That's the biggest thing. It's however hard it might be for me to do something or stare at a screen for 8 hours. I know you guys are doing the same because you're staring at teachers give presentations for 7 hours a day too.
I'm really impressed with my colleagues and my supervisors here at the 1012 Center, and the students, and just the staff in general. Everyone has reworked their lives entirely to kind of pull this off and to do what's best for everyone. And I know that everyone's individual situation has been incredibly stressful and difficult. That's my one takeaway, is that there's still beauty, even though this is really dark and awful.